Do you remember that odd fella from the EU called Guy Verhofstadt? He was making a lot of noise around Brexit, and he's a good example of one of those sneering, distant, seemingly unelected elites that made the British people vote Brexit in the first place. Now, recently he made a very bizarre statement which basically implies that Europe will have infinity migrants forever. As you can see on this tweet on screen, he's pointing towards the UK immigration figures which have gone insane after Brexit, and he states, a lesson to all countries tempted to believe the extreme right and think that leaving the EU and closing borders will make migration disappear. Now, firstly, as I've covered many times on this channel, as soon as these liberal elites start saying things like extreme right, far right, and using the isms and phobias, you know they're trying to manipulate somebody. So ignoring the fact he still doesn't understand Brexit or why the British people and now many Europeans want to leave the EU, the next point he makes is, we were wrong to believe that leaving the EU will make migration disappear. Firstly, the reason people wanted to leave the EU in the first place and why many Europeans are now sick of it is because the EU forces mass migration on countries, as they did a month ago, where they've now got legislation which states that every single country has to accept infinity migrants and will be charged if they refuse. And then his final statement is just absurd, the belief that closing borders will make migration disappear. Of course it will make migration disappear. And therein lies the whole point. Britain was never really allowed to implement Brexit, nor allowed to ever close its borders. So the lesson we must learn is, while the EU was dictating our migration policy, that itself was simply just an arm of the broader globalist policy which enforces mass migration amongst Western nations. So all our friend Guy here is really doing is gloating like the liberal authoritarian he is and telling us that you should never be able to have self-determination in your own country, you will never escape mass migration, and you should never question the wise old EU. So then the mandate for us is very clear. The UK and the rest of Europe must break free from the globalist liberal paradigm that controls the Western world right now. This will be the central battleground if the countries of Europe are to maintain their peoples and cultures into the future. Anyway, personally, I'm still very proud of the British people for voting Brexit, even if we were screwed over for it. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know yours down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.